Navigating through the heart of massive old-growth blowdowns, the trek. This morning I managed to sleep a bit earlier than usual while setting up camp at the summit of the mountain. It was a late-night adventure last night, and by dawn I hadn't even started walking yet, around 5:30 a.m. That felt like a long time because I was hoping to tackle about 40 miles of trail today, which would likely involve some challenging terrain. When I finally left my tent, I had a stunning view of the sunrise from my position. It was a perfect way to kick off the day. The sunrise this morning was one of my favorite moments of the entire trip. But I always say that every day is a reminder of how incredible it is. Being at the summit meant I could enjoy a smooth downhill stretch right away, which was a relief. The views continued to be breathtaking, with rocky landscapes that made the journey feel like a scenic drive. I knew eventually, after around 5 to 6 miles, I'd enter a wooded area, and the fun would begin. I remember encountering several blowdowns and a few river crossings, but the details were fuzzy enough to make me wonder what's next. However, if I could do this in 2022, I'm confident I can handle it now. The first couple of hours of the day were peaceful, with very few downed trees. As I approached the bottom of the descent, things got a bit rougher. I had to navigate my first river crossing of the day. There were options to keep my feet dry, but if a log was crossing a river and was covered in water or looked slick, I usually opted to get into the water. I figured with a few crossings, I wouldn't be able to keep my feet dry, so I committed to the first one and got my feet wet immediately. Personally, I'd rather have wet feet than slip off a log and end up completely soaked. The trail followed the river for a while. In between the crossings, there were tons of downed trees. Some were massive and hard to navigate, while others were easy to climb over. A few required climbing, and some had so many branches that it was hard to move past. I knew this would be the pattern for most of the day. A footbridge crossed the river. The good part was that for every few miles of tough terrain, there were miles of easier trails. Though easier is relative, the trail wasn't always fully covered in downed trees. Sometimes it was overgrown, with branches hitting me as I walked. The trail also had steep angles, requiring caution to avoid slipping and falling off. Plus, there was a lot of erosion, likely from the same force causing all these trees to fall. This bridge was broken down to the middle, but I still managed to cross it cautiously. Overall, it could have been much worse. People have complained about these conditions on the map, but so far, they seemed exaggerated. Even 100 downed trees and a few crossings don't seem like the end of the world. You could be walking through trail conditions far worse than that. The forest section was bright and vibrant. For the rest of the day, I had a lot of elevation changes. The trail would rise between 4 to 8 miles and then drop back down. Usually, one side of the climb was free of downed trees, and the northbound descent was often covered in blowdowns. I prefer navigating around blowdowns when going downhill, not uphill. Northbound climbs often had thick overgrowth or narrow sloped sections. All things considered, I was surprised the day was still moving quickly. By early afternoon, I had already gone at least 20 miles. It looked like I could still finish the 40-mile goal. It would be a slightly longer and more exhausting day than usual. The final push up to the top of a pass was a big challenge. Toward the middle of the day, I had a massive climb to do. Once I reached the top, the trail was wide open and expansive. It reminded me of the Sierra's mountain passes, with rocky terrain and beautiful vistas. I had to go up and over at least one pass today, which was wonderful. The 360-degree views at the top of a mountain or pass are unmatched. The weather was perfect, too. After cresting the top, I took a short break. The spot was perfect. Then I began my descent. Coming off the peak, I had a huge descent. The surrounding trail was full of blueberries, so I picked them as I went. By this point, I was pretty sure I'd reach camp before dark. Even doing a longer day, I'd be heading toward the Milk Creek area. When you're going northbound, the river crossings and blowdowns near Milk Creek are where most of the action happens. But once you drop down, those biggest blowdowns are where the real action is. They were exactly the same as they were in 2022. I'm obsessed with this flavor. Because the trail passes through wilderness areas, maintenance isn't using chainsaws. Typically, you can't use them in wilderness zones. These blowdowns were so massive that removing them would be impossible. Some trees were 6 to 7 feet wide, requiring climbing around or under the trail. Sometimes, you'd have to pick up a switchback on the other side, but there's no other way to get rid of them. The trail passed by this beautiful lake. When I was descending toward Milk Creek, I remembered this section vividly. But I honestly prefer those types of blowdowns. Earlier in the day, walking across a narrow ridge with a down tree was annoying. You can't just walk off the trail and around it. Down by Milk Creek, it was flat and easy to navigate around the trees. I had to walk around with this massive down tree. After reaching the top of that final climb, the rest of the day was downhill. Other than a 100 to 200 foot climb and flat sections, it was mostly downhill. I had about 4 easy miles to do, besides all the blowdowns I'd have to navigate around. After one final time, it was all downhill for the rest of the day. That was a relief. Despite the climbing, I felt nice to relax. I think I'd gained about 7,000 feet of elevation that day. Yesterday, over my 40-plus miles, I gained about 9,500 feet. Washington is definitely no joke. When I had only 6 miles left, I started looking for water sources. I saw a comment that resonated with me. Someone had said the trail was real tidy. For the next 6 miles, it was music to my ears. I had only 6 miles left, and now I could enjoy those last few hours. Walking along a leisurely trail without obstacles sounded amazing. It turned out to be a nice ending to the day. The trail was absolutely beautiful, pristine compared to what I'd done before. I listened to music and relaxed, taking my mind off everything. It felt good to wind down, especially since I didn't have any more climbing to do. I found water a couple miles from camp and pushed on to a large tent site, which was right at the base of the next big climb. In the morning, I'd have 9 miles of continuous climbing to reach the top of that next mountain pass. But that would be the biggest climb of the day. It sounded like a good idea to set up early to prep for the morning. It's crazy how big some of these down trees are. Throughout the day, I hardly saw anyone. There was one hiker in the afternoon who seemed like a PCT hiker. Then I saw a few section hikers going the opposite direction. In the evening, 2 more hikers could have been through hikers, but mostly I didn't see anyone. As the day dragged on, I started looking for tent sites, and suddenly, people were everywhere. I was nervous when arriving at my intended camp spot, seeing 5 or 6 tents set up, but the place was enormous, and there were still plenty of good spots. It was after 9 p.m., so I felt bad stepping into someone else's tenting area. Luckily, I was far away, but it was still close. There were no marked sites before the next climb started. I was almost 40 miles into a long day. I settled in quietly for the night. I boiled my water while setting up my tent. By the time everything was ready, my dehydrated mountain house meal was cooked and ready. I don't know why I don't do that more often. I got comfortable and fell into my tent, enjoying my mountain house beef lasagna. I worked a bit before calling it a night. Because of the big day, I set myself up for tomorrow. Originally, I planned to take the 6:15 p.m. bus to Stehekin. That would be nice and allow me to hit the store before closing, but the bakery would be closed until morning, and I couldn't get a shuttle out of town until around 9 a.m. the next day. This river was so dark with silt, but it looked really cool. But since I went so far today, I opened up a new possibility. If I start early tomorrow, I could make the 3:15 p.m. shuttle. It would require walking 4 a.m. tomorrow, but it seems worth it. I could get into the bakery before closing. I'm planning to do my entire resupply with bakery food. It's either that, or overpriced food from the general store. One of those two is going to be much better. If I take the 3:15 p.m. shuttle, I could go into town and grab everything I needed, but I'd still likely make it back to the trail by 6 p.m. That means I could go a few more miles for the day. More important than anything, it meant I wouldn't have to wait for the 9 a.m. shuttle the next day. When on the trail, I usually start walking around 5 to 6 a.m., so missing the first 4 hours of my hike would be a real bummer. Honestly, it sounds worth it to start early tomorrow to catch that bus. If you enjoyed this blog and want to support my hike by buying me a soda or snack along the way, there's a Tip the Author button below. It links directly to my Venmo. Any and all support is incredibly appreciated.